Hello again. This module, we're going to be looking a little bit deeper at literary devices. So the last module, you were introduced to the elements of fiction, and I also introduced you to some literary devices. And for this one, I'm going to go a little bit deeper with literary devices that you're going to see pop up in our fiction reading, and more to the point, it's going to be in our poetry readings. But they cross over both poetry and literature. So we're going to take a look at all of these. And it's a good idea to familiarize yourself, again, with the definitions of things, so that when you are analyzing the work this semester, you're going to have the vocabulary and the tools to recognize and to analyze what you are reading. So let's take a look at the first two here, simile and metaphor. We're all familiar, right, with these two, but they are often confused with each other to an extent. So simile, of course, is we're going to compare two things and we're going to use like or as. And that's the simplistic version, right? Like a writhing snake, the broken electrical wires hissed and twitched. So we all know what a writhing snake looks like. So now we have a visual of what the electrical wires look like. So it's helping us, the reader, understand and see what is happening, right? The other one, metaphor, is similar to simile. Of course, not using like or as, but it goes a little bit deeper. Metaphor is not as simplistic as simile. Simile is something that's pretty easy to visualize. And, when something is metaphoric, it's kind of symbolic. There's like something deeper happening underneath it. A metaphor usually will have more of a deeper meaning behind it. This example of a metaphor is just a simplistic example. The cat's eyes were jewels. So we know that we're not using like or as. We could say the cat's eyes were like jewels. The cat's eyes were as jewels, something like that. That would, of course, make it a simile. But it is a simplistic example of what a metaphor is. It's just stating that's what it is. Two unlike things, cat's eyes and jewels, are used to compare each other to get a deeper meaning. Now let's take a look at hyperbole. Hyperbole is used, again, usually with poetry, which is to make a total exaggeration. The hyperbolic type of language often has a reason. However, a poet or a fiction writer is going to use hyperbole to get a bigger point across. It's obviously an exaggeration, but it's exaggerated for a reason. So you want to notice that when you see like hyperbolic language, it's like, this is really over the top stuff. Why is the author using that? So again, a simple example, I had to wait an eternity for the file to download, is hyperbolic because, needless to say, we can't wait an eternity for anything, right? Let's take a look at pun. Now, pun is going to be used, it's a play on words, and some authors really enjoy playing with words, except it's used in a humorous fashion, and it often is very corny. The famous punner is Shakespeare, and you study Shakespeare, you will soon learn and see how much he enjoys playing with words and making puns. But, he's Shakespeare, he can get away with it, because puns usually are groaners. It's you hear somebody make a pun and you go, oh, that's just so corny. So, for example, Then there was the doctor who liked to needle his patients just to make a point. Oh, how corny could you get, right? So doctor uses needle. Needle is a play on words because needle is, an actual thing, And then needle is also, I'm trying to get at you, right? And it makes a point. You see how corny that is? But again, you'll see it sometimes with some authors and especially with Shakespeare. So let's take a look at paradox. Paradox is something that's also often used in poetry. And basically, paradox is something that cannot be literally true. It's contradictory. Okay? So if we look at this paradox here, the child is father to the man. Well, needless to say, a child cannot father a man. It's just that's the opposite way. But then what could it actually mean? Why is this paradox being presented? Think about that. The child is father to the man. It could be saying that in order to be a man, the definition of a man needs to become a father. And that child helps him grow up, be a man. So that could be one interpretation. The child is father to the man. Here's another one, is an illusion. And as you continue in your education, it's one thing to notice that illusions are going to take advantage of people's knowledge base. So when somebody makes an allusion to something, it's going to be, a big event. It's going to be something that happened in history, or it's going to be a work of literature, or it's going to be a work of art. And then, the knowledgeable person immediately understands what the other person is trying to get across when they use an allusion. If I allude to you that she smiled like the Mona Lisa, that should have meaning for you, right? Because the Mona Lisa smile is something that has been fascinating people for centuries now, right? It's enigmatic. We don't understand what it means. So if I make an allusion to the Mona Lisa or somebody smiling like that, then you should have an understanding of what I mean. So if we look at this, casual and confident, the West High football team started the game that was to prove their Alamo. So you know what the Alamo is, and then you know what happens to the West High football team. And if you don't know, you can look it up. Okay, we'll look at this quickly. Onomatopoeia. When you see that, you would know that it means a word that imitates what it represents. So you might see that in poetry. Burning wood is crackling and hissing. Owls hoot, etc. Personification, again, is something where you take an inanimate object and you're going to give it human-like qualities. So love enfolded us in her arms. Well, love is an abstract thought, right? Love is an abstract emotion. But here we are personifying love, and we're getting the point across that, look at us, love has taken us into her arms, and I guess make us feel all happy. Let's look at here, internal rhyme. Okay, so rhyming within the line. So for poetry, we'll have one line, and that line, if you see the same sound being repeated within that one line, that's called internal rhyme. Too bright for our infirm delight. So you can see that the I is repeating itself, okay? In that one line, that's internal rhyme. Let's look at this. Assonance is going to be the repetition of vowel sounds, but not consonant sounds. So internal rhyme can also be assonance, but again, internal rhyme is just going to be something that's on one line. Assonance can come on different lines. So the repetition of vowel sounds. We real cool. We left school. So you hear the ooh sound. And then the opposite of that is consonants. Again, doesn't have to be on one line. It could be on several lines. And that's the repetition of consonant sounds. As a prelude to my lay, from a poet to a poem. So you're going to hear the P sound being repeated. And then the last one on this slide is alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the initial consonant sounds, and the words have to be next to each other or very close to each other. So, see the flying French depart, like the bees of Bonaparte, swarming up with the most venomous vitality. What initial consonant sounds do you see being repeated? Probably the F sound, the B sound, the V sound, right? So that is alliteration. And let's look at the one last slide. We're going to look at foreshadowing and repetition. Foreshadowing is going to be in fiction, or it's going to be in poetry, and it is something that suggests what will happen later on. It's kind of like, if you pay attention to foreshadowing, if you get good at this, right, it's like you can almost guess what's going to happen at the end. It's very interesting when it's done right. So if we're reading the story like a winding sheet, the character makes a reference to Friday the 13th. I submit to you this: anytime a character makes a reference to Friday the 13th, or a black cat crossing their path, or, walking under a ladder, etc., something bad might be happening to that character, right? So that is foreshadowing. It's like you can see that something is going to happen because it's a clue. It's giving a hint. The author is. And the last thing that we're going to look at is repetition. And repetition can be used in fiction, poetry, it can be used in speeches. It, of course, is going to be something that is being repeated, and it's emphasizing. If it's emphasizing an idea, or maybe in poetry it's emphasizing just a feel and a sound. So if we see this one, I have seen it over and over, the same sea, the same slightly indifferently swinging above the stones, icily free above the stones, and then the world. This is really interesting. If you repeat it to yourself, if you say it out loud, which you should with poetry, because a lot of times it's very musical and lyrical, you can see that the poet is repeating it in order to get a kind of feel and a sound. I have seen it over and over, the same sea, the same slightly indifferently swinging above the stones, icily free above the stones, and then the world. See, it gives this, first of all, you see alliteration in here. You can see a lot of other poetic devices that are happening. Go back to your vocabulary that we've just covered and see what you can discover. And then you have the repetition of the words over and over, the same, okay? Now we have the stones. And what is the image that it gives you? It should give you an image of waves, right? It's the same. The waves keep, and they're going over the stones, and then they go above, and it's like this wave that continues, that presses forward. So that is the kind of image that Elizabeth Bishop is giving using repetition. So we've just gone through and defined a few of the elements that you should be looking for when we are studying this semester, whether we're studying fiction or if you're looking at some poetry. Using these techniques to help you analyze is going to give you a deeper understanding of the stuff that we are reading, and it also helps with your critical thinking. Okay, thanks.